Hello, what's up guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Emmanuel. In today's video we're going to be talking about the Tkinter concepts you need to know before we start this series, playlist, or whatever I call this course. Okay, now for those of you who might have expected a video yesterday, as I do drop videos on Tuesdays as of now, sorry about that. I had an issue with my OS, ran into an error and I couldn't do anything on my PC, so sorry about that. Before we take a step into tutorial, make sure you smash the like button, click the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. Now let's get into the video. Just to mention shortly, I'll be keeping this course as simple as possible and only communicate what needs to be spoken about. Okay, so if you're a complete beginner, I spoke about this in my last video, I think it's what I mentioned anyway. So if you're a beginner, just make sure you're familiar with Python. You should be able to take on this course, as I'm going to be explaining it being simplified. Okay, that's the point of this series. Now, things to take note of before we start the video. You need to know that TK has a number of things handled for us we might not need to worry about. For example, we don't need to do a lot of configurations for our widgets. We're going to talk about widgets in a bit, but when I say widget, I mean things like buttons and stuff like that. So we just have to do root from this and then we give it a text, just simple as that. So we don't need to do a lot of configurations. When we resize our window, for example, if I run this code, okay, it's of course not going to show. When we run our window, when we resize our window, we don't need to worry about what happens when we do this. Most times, as far as we manage our widgets well. Okay, I don't want to talk about all those things because I'm still going to talk about them later into this video. And making our app cross-platform. For example, if I should build an app, this same app I can run it on a Mac and a Linux. All you have to do is just make sure you have Tkinter installed on that, and if you have Python, you most likely have Tkinter installed. So since a lot of things are done for us, which makes it easy for you, and you don't have a lot to worry about when it comes to making it compatible for different operating systems. Now let's start the real deal for today, talking about the concept. Now when we are building an app, there are three things we talk about, or three things we either consciously or subconsciously think about. Now these are what you see on the screen, like the buttons, the text, stuff like that. Secondly, how you arrange these things. Notice we don't have this in the middle of this. Of course, it won't make any sense. We have this menu up here and stuff like that. That's one thing you also should think about, or you actually know or think about. That's how we arrange these things and their functionality. For example, if I click this, what does it do? Okay, it expands and stuff like that. When I do drag this, what does it do? The functionality. These are three things you need to know about when we are talking about GUI, which is graphical user interface. Okay, we need to put this. I need to put this out so you know what that is all about. And then this leads us to what we see. So when I say what we see, I mean the widgets. Of course, I've spoken about this a lot. I've mentioned it. Widgets. When we're talking about widgets, we're talking about the text we see on the screen. We refer to them to as label here in Tkinter. We also have the button. We have check boxes, where those boxes to check. We have scroll bars. For now, we have a lot. We have entry boxes, like those boxes where you type your names before you submit your forms. We have a lot of widgets we're going to talk about very soon. I think we're going to start after this video anyway. Then how we arrange them. When we say how we arrange them, of course we're talking about geometry management. How we arrange them has a lot to do with what the user perceives of your app. So example, how you arrange this, we have this at the side, the sidebar. We can choose to put it on this side. So if you are building our own, why we have this on this side and why we don't have it on this side. You get the point. So that's all about geometry management. Why we have this up here, why we don't have this just beside this. Okay, so that's geometry management, how you arrange your widget. We're going to be learning that here in this series as well. And lastly, what happens, the functionality in the app. So when you click on the button, what happens? Does it submit it? Does it take you to a new page? Does it open a new dialog? So it's basically what happens whenever you do things. When you press different. So because I'm still going to expand on this, so I'm trying to just keep the beginning as simple as possible, and the video should be really short. Okay, now let's talk about this more a little bit. Now, okay, what are widgets and why do we need to know them? Of course, we need to know widgets because they are what we basically see on our screens in our app. Now, it's important to mention that widgets are just objects as always in Python. Of course, if you watch my series on the Python beginners course, I talked about objects. Everything in Python, most likely we do call them objects. Everything in Python are objects actually. Now widgets are also objects. So whenever we have a button is actually an instance of a class representing a button, okay? Because classes are used to create objects, so we are creating an instance of a button here. And this also applies to all that widgets. So widgets are just basically objects. Now next up, geometry managers, or geometry management rather. This is simply how we place objects in our app, how we arrange them as well. That's the same thing. I mentioned this earlier. Now in Tkinter we have three geometry managers. We have the grid, which you probably use a lot, and we use two in this course. We have the pack manager, and then we have the place geometry manager. Forgive me for that. You use this as well. I want you to notice, without using a geometry manager, you can't display anything on your base window. As you saw earlier when I tried running this, see we don't have anything here. But if I should do .pack, yeah, or .grid, anyone, you've seen me use .grid in the last video. So if I do contribute now, you see it here. If I change it to grid, let me run this, and then you see it here. But you can obviously start seeing the difference. This grid puts it to the left, while pack puts it at the center. Okay. I don't know if you noticed that, but and by the way, there's something new by Sublime. When I run this, it automatically overrides this. The former Sublime, when you run the Tkinter app, it won't work till you cancel the one that was open before. But now that one just closes and then opens the new one, which is cool. They're making real progress, and I think they're doing a great job. Anyway, that's not the point of this tutorial rather. And finally, before I move on to the next one, we also, the grid, when you talk about grid, you're not just going to be using them this way. Of course, we're still going to talk about how you actually use them, how you place different items. That's why it's called a grid. You can place things at the left, right, and make it take like two different spaces. We have different rows and columns. When we talk the grid, comes to grid, we'll talk about that. When we talk about place, you can top, left, size like that. When we talk about, sorry, that's for pack. And when we talk about place, that's a little bit specific. We'll get to that too as well when we actually get to geometry management, explaining how to use it. So this is just about the concepts and not really coding. Now finally, how your widgets behave. Event handling is what makes an app, in quotes, fun. What happens when you click a button? When you hit the return or the enter button, so it depends on where you are from. Some people call the enter return button or key, or even when you press the combinations of keys, I mean shortcuts, if that's what you know it as. It is important to know that event handling also makes it easy to use an app. So for example, what happens if, okay, I still have this open, what happens if I click this button? Nothing happens. So that's part of event handling. When we click this, what do we want to happen? That's something we're going to have to deal with. When we press escape, normally in some apps, when you have a dialog and you press escape, we all most likely see it as a way of closing a pop-up. So whenever we have a pop-up rather and press escape, it closes it. So that's actually because most people are just building an app like that, or Windows also, or Mac, or whatever operating system you use are using stuff like that, and it has been consistent. So I can choose to give it something different in my own app. If I want to close pop-ups, I can choose to give it one. Whenever I press one, it closes it instead of escape. But of course, it's ideal to use escape. Now this all ties down to event handling. Whenever I click a checkbox, what do you want to happen? Of course, it's gonna check it. This is part of event handling. Whenever I press Ctrl Shift something, or whenever I press the left click on something, what happens? So all these are just event handling. You get the point, how you behave, how you interact with your GUI interface, your GUI or your user interfaces. Okay, I feel I don't want to just want to go about just the surface of things, and I'm as simple as it sounds is as simple as it is, really. Now it's important to know that widgets are in hierarchy such that they inherit from other widgets, which somehow can have control over its children widgets. Okay, this is to say widgets behave in a master and slave way. For example, look at this. You see, most of you don't know the reason why we have this truth, which I will still talk about. I'll just talk about it now. For example, we want to display our button. So for us to be able to display it, we need to specify where we want it to be displayed. So we want it to display inside our root. So this is our root, this base window where we have this, the size, all this is our root, and then we say we want our button to be in here. So this somehow has control over this button. So if I decide to increase the size or reduce the size of my root to something just cut across this, it will definitely affect the button. Okay, and this as well is called, you can call this a slave of root. So that's what I just mean basically. And of course there are some way we can just go over this and make and override that behavior and just make sure we can do certain things with widgets without the master really affecting it. We'll talk about that later when we start this series. Okay, so we're gonna learn more about this. More, I don't want to say in depth so it doesn't sound like it's complicated. And in the next video we'll talk about these basic widgets more and more before we go on to geometry management and event handling. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, then you should give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on my next epic content. Much love guys. I try to keep this as soon as possible, no cutting. Peace out.